studying Philippians, and I'm getting feedback from somebody. I don't know, Jack and Terry, if you would mute, could you mute? We're getting feedback from somebody. There, okay. I think it's gone. Anyway, so we'll look at, we're still in the first section of it here, which is the, hang on a second, we're still getting, what's that? Yeah, but I don't think it's, let me see here, where it's coming from.
Is it
No, I've got that one's already muted. Jack, if you're gonna talk there, let me think. You're muted. Okay, I think we're,
I turned the sound off once, then back on.
okay. All right, we'll try here again.
Keep squalling, I'll turn the sound off and listen.
Yeah, we're okay now, I think. No. Anyway, we're in the first part here, talking basically the salutation or the first part where he's praying for the Philippians. We're done with the salutation, but there's several verses in here, and really just focus on verse 5 today. We're actually first 5 verses, but with a focus on 5, and really titled this or looking at this called "Shares in the Struggle" or "Sharing in the Struggle." And as we start out,
Mike, I hate to interrupt, but you're not shared.
oh, okay. All right. And where do you get back? What's that? No, let's see. Okay, thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. Um, all right. Are we there?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. I would have just gone merrily along. Okay. Anyway, let's look at Philippians 1 through 5. And would somebody read those first 5 verses again?
Well, together now.
Okay, everybody, who's good? Go ahead, Dee. You're going to start.
Paul and Timothy, all the saints. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you, all making my prayer with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now.
Okay. So there's a story that I found that it goes like this. Some time ago, a minister walked out of a prestigious pulpit in the Deep South and said he was not going back. When interviewed as to why a man so loved and accepted would arrive at such a decision, he replied, "Oh, they were wonderful friends. I have never lived in a place where I was more accepted. They took me fishing in Florida, deer hunting up north. They gave me a membership in the country club and paid me a great salary. Why, they even accepted my wife and children. But you couldn't count on them. Whenever you needed a committee member, whenever there was a class to be taught, when there was a problem and I needed help, they were not around and they did not care. Finally, I just couldn't take it any longer And I walked out one Sunday and told them I would never come back. So the question is, in this case, then, what happened? What happened in there caused that him to quit?
Well, either their support up to that time was ingenuine, or perhaps, like I see going on here, communication is not doing well from the top. And from the top down and from the bottom up. Needs to be two-way communication, honest, open, and that kind of thing. Anyway, it's perceptions. I think,
Mhm.
maybe not intended, but anyway, it just comes across that way.
Mhm. Do you think that there were signs in this church that we were talking, that signs that this was brewing, that this was going to happen? You think there were indicators that people could have noticed?
Yes. I think sometimes people feel a superficial need, but don't do the genuine need
Mm-hmm.
of emotional
The
support.
superficial needs, not the genuine
Yeah.
needs. Mm-hmm.
There.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes needed moral support, but not there. It's just superficial
Right,
support. Hi, how you doing?
yeah, exactly.
I think Satan, he's the one that, he's really a deceiver, and he knows where your weak points are and what your problems are. He knows how to get in and work in behind you and make it all apart.
Yeah, sometimes in there, those little things are just brewing, little embers that are just kind of waiting to catch fire, and yeah. So what in this hypothetical church, I mean, I don't know if this didn't say who or what church, is just kind of anonymous here, but in this hypothetical situation, let's say, what could have kept it from happening? What keep that from happening?
People have to become aware of being a good servant to people. You know, I mean, Phil, if you see a need or know of a need, address the need. A
Uh-huh.
lot of times people will know about something, but they won't do anything.
Yeah,
I see it all the time, and I don't understand it.
it's a need or a need, and sometimes I guess you think that the reason that we see a need or it's brought to our attention is because we need to do something about it, I guess, yeah, and we don't
And I
sometimes.
think- Really, how are you doing?
Yeah,
How are you doing?
yeah. Don't give me the Sunday school
No
answer.
service, no smiley face, no, when you walk out the door, you forget about that person's need. That's
Hmm.
not right.
Hmm. The old British stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't want to say anything. They just kind of hold it inside and it kind of festers inside of them. They're ashamed maybe to even ask for help
Yeah.
or something like that. You know, it's like you said, two-way communication
Yeah.
needs to take place.
Yeah.
The time, when you turn your life over to the Lord, you put your hand in his hand, and he says he gives you the strength to go on to the, you're not fooling God, he knows what's going on. And he can, if we turn our problems over to him and lay it on the altar, he's got the strength and he can win and fight our own battles for us. That's the
Mhm.
way I look at it. He's the one that keeps me going.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a church where this has happened, where the pastors quit? Yeah, not for that reason. Yeah, we did, it happened, our church in Shawnee, Pastor Brown had a heart condition. And basically, the stress of the job, the doctor said was killing him. And he resigned for health reasons. And when he resigned, it would have been 1995 or 1996. He's still alive now. I mean, he got out from under that stress, but he was under stress. I don't recognize that. That's it. It didn't happen exactly like this example here. Anyway, let me show this little discussion of pastors.
So the issue we're talking about today is what are pastors facing post-pandemic? And Dave, you deal with pastors all the time. What are some of the biggest issues that they're facing right now?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that happened, my assessment would be, and actually we joined full time during COVID. So we transitioned out of our church, pastoring in Michigan. Actually, we made the decision, we made the announcement at the end of 2019, and then we kind of had a few months to try to ramp up, and then that's when COVID hit. But we still transitioned out, and I think I would have said prior to COVID, a lot of pastors were hanging on for dear life, but they could make it. They can, pragmatically, functionally, they can get by, but they're struggling. I think COVID was kind of like if you've got a bunch of twigs on the ground and you drop a big log and a big oak log on top of them, and it just kind of crushes them. I think COVID, what it did was it was more than what they could handle. They made it through it. I think a lot of guys, I mean, you look back at the creativity of some guys. I mean, even, I'm not a techie, so I know what we did. I went to Walmart, I bought a little tripod, and I stuck my little Samsung phone on this tripod, and I did Facebook Live worship services. So we figured it out. But I think the consequences coming out of that are that, basically you're restarting a lot of churches from organizing and just thinking through, processing through, because so many people left, didn't come back. Things changed technologically, things changed. And so I think the pastor that was maybe at the end of his rope has just kind of struggled to kind of get back up. I think what we've seen, and you can look at some of the statistics where so many guys are stepping out of ministry and kind of done, or they're just kind of checked out in their own right. And so I think that's a lot of the things that they're dealing with post the pandemic is just trying to think about how do we reorganize? It's kind of like, like a bomb went off, and now we got to figure out who's left, who's here, what are we doing, and how do we restart? And honestly, I mean, we love pastors. I mean, I was a pastor 20 years. Most pastors, this is not a knock on them, it's just how God has wired them. Most pastors are like in the moment of the week. Sunday's coming. I gotta make hospital visits. I gotta write a message or two or three or more, and I gotta deal with complaints and things. And most pastors don't have the ability to pull up to the 30,000-foot level to figure out where are we going, what are we doing, how are we going to get there. And so they're just plodding along, and they're just trying to make it. And so I think the struggles for them is to say, how do I actually humble myself to get help, to say I need some help, come alongside of us. And I think that's what they're struggling with. I think they're struggling with one of the other things I think that they're struggling with, and at some point I think I'm going to write an article on this, but I think one of the things that's happening is social media is having a drastic impact on our pastors and even church people. I think God has designed us to be able to handle, personally, we can do 4 or 5 or 6 things really, really well. Maybe some of us have more bandwidth, but let's just say it's 4 to 6 things that we can do really well. And a church probably has 4 to 6 things that it does really well. The problem is we flip through Instagram, we flip through Facebook, we flip through all the social media, and we see, oh, Revolve Bible Church is doing that. We should do that. Then we look at that church is doing this. And now, before we know it, we've stacked 1,000 things onto the expectation list that we now think we have to do both personally as a pastor and then corporately as a church. And I think that is killing us. And that is actually unbiblical because God didn't call us or design us or equip us to do that. And so I think the social media stuff, although there's a great benefit to it, is awesome. But I think we've got to be really careful how we should, instead of looking, like if I'm scrolling through and I see something that Revolve Bible Church does, instead of looking at that and going, oh, I should be doing that, we should actually just say, wow, that's great and awesome that God is letting them do that. And I don't need to be Revolve Bible Church along with 5,000 other churches out there and putting that weight and that pressure. And so I think that's a lot of the underlying issues that pastors are going through.
What do you think? What do you think? Any valid comments there? Or ring true? Gary? Yeah, okay.
Watching. I think we all think that's lost.
Back to your golf course, your country clubs and that, what was the subject of conversation?
Yeah, Jack, hold on a second. Gary's talking here. Just hang on a second.
Whole nation betrayed by politics. And so here our pastors are trying to teach trust in the Lord, not on your own understanding in all things. Okay, that's scriptural. And even they were betrayed by people who were betrayed and it carried down to them. And you know, this whole thing about COVID, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, get the shots, do this, do that, and all that kind of stuff. That was a huge betrayal of everybody about what is right, what is righteous, and what isn't righteous. And I think a lot of pastors, and you know, from my standpoint, being involved as a deacon, I think pastors are getting burned out. I mean, I think they're just, so many of them are just saying enough is enough. And they're taking the brunt of the heat that's coming from the congregation about this and that. A lot of it's political.
Yeah, and almost in a no-win situation. Yeah.
You know, it's like, Lord, what do I do now? I've been betrayed from every facet of society. People won't trust in the Lord. They won't follow the teaching of the Bible. And why is that? Well, it's pretty clear to me. It's about betrayal and trust. And people are now saying, I just don't trust the church either. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people have, when COVID happened, a lot of people left church because they could watch church on TV. And they have not come back since.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's gotta hurt.
Yeah, I kind of the thought of it's like a bomb went off, and now we're trying to figure out who's here, who's not, where do we go, what do we do now? So it's what was a tough ministry before now has really been even tougher in this particular environment. Okay, Jack, you were saying something?
Yes, it was. Back to the conversations in the country club and the golf and that.
So
What
the
was the
issue we're
subject
talking
of the conversation?
What was the what?
Subject of the conversation. What was discussed?
The you mean in the situation itself in the
Men can talk about their automobiles and building a house.
yeah,
But-
yeah. So yeah, it was I see what you're saying. The conversations that they had were about superficial things. Is that what you mean?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mike,
Yes.
if I may, I think the biggest problem now, the number one problem is there are members of the church and the congregation who either fail to buy in to the pastor's vision for the future and he's leading as he has received it from God, or they just they're not bought into it, or they're just not bought into it, and that's causing a big stress on him and the entire staff, because they know what direction God wants us to take as a church. But with the congregation uh, fighting that, it is a lose-lose situation for them.
Yeah, yeah. And let me just take what you and jump right from what you just said, Terry, and let's look at that verse 5 again. And it says, and he's saying, with all joy, he says here, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. And so I looked that we could skip over that word fellowship and not see there's a lot of meaning in that word. In fact, it's translated different ways in different translations. So, for example, in the NIV, it's translated partnership. In the Amplified Version, it's participation and gracious contributions. In Contemporary English translation, it's taken part with me. In the Easy English translation, you have always helped. The Living Word or Living Translation says all of your wonderful help. And in the Wycliffe, it's communing in the gospel together. So you get a difference. If we look at this verse 5 and see that word fellowship, we think of maybe after church dinners and meals and Wednesday night suppers, and we get together at tequilas and things. But that word fellowship is really what Paul is joyful about, and he is thanking them for and praising them for and thinking about them when he's in prison. Remember, he's writing this from a prison. He's in Rome in prison, and he's joyful because of their partnership, their participation, their contributions, their help, communing with him in this ministry that he's done. The Philippians church, I think, is unique of all the New Testament churches that Paul started in the relationship and the support from the church to Paul that continued even when he was in prison. They're in Philippi in Greece, and he's in prison in Rome, and yet they are sending gifts. They are sending people. They're exchanging letters. Keeping in touch. Anyway, so that's what he's joyful about, and that's what I think we can focus on here. So this brings into mind several words, and we kind of touched on them in the discussion and in that video, the burnout. I think we see there's a lot of pastors and pastoral staff and they're just burning out. I mean, they're taking on that. They're discouraged maybe. They don't see the load sharing, the people coming alongside and picking up things. The need for partnership and teamwork and collaboration, all these kind of words are kind of built into this. What Paul's talking about in verse 5 in the word fellowship is to keep these things from happening. So what did the Philippians do? I mean, we look at these verses, that, and we touched on some of these last week. Is they supported him when he was there in Philippi, and then again they supported him when he wasn't there, when he was in prison or elsewhere. But they did hospitality, invited him into their homes, provided meals, provided a place to stay, a headquarters, if you will, while they were in Philippi. Dressed his wounds when he was beaten after when he was put in jail there in Philippi. The Philippian jailer and his family took care of him. They dressed his wounds. They gave him, food and water, took care of him. They provided gifts. They were one of the example churches that Paul uses in others. And when he writes to the Galatians, for example, he uses the ones in Philippi as an example. as they are setting the example as far as giving. They were the first ones to give to the for the purpose of taking a gift to the saints in Jerusalem. You know, Paul took a gift back to because there was famine of the saints in Jerusalem, and the church in Philippi was one of the first churches to contribute to that. And Paul took that gift to them. They were providing those gifts. And Paul mentions in 2 Corinthians there that they gave themselves to the Lord. I mean, what more joy would that bring Paul than to see the people who are new Christians in these new churches give themselves to the Lord? So they were being obedient to God. That gave Paul joy. It says they abounded in faith, speech, knowledge, and diligence. That's in 2 Corinthians. So they were living the life. I mean, they were living the Christian life, setting the example, and they were abounding in their faith, and they participated in and showed love. And when he was in Corinth, when he was in Corinth and preaching the gospel, and Paul made the point is that he was not dependent upon the for his sustenance from the church at Corinth. The help was coming from Philippi. It was the Philippians that was supporting him while he was preaching. So it was like he was their missionary, if you will, and they were supporting their missionary. He was in Corinth. Philippi was in the back providing those needs. So in other words, I think the thing that brought Paul joy and why he talks about in verse 5 and 4 about the joy is that they partnered. They were like the expression, joined at the hip. I mean, they were together in this enterprise, and he could count on their prayers and their physical support and the fact that they were involved in the ministry too. I mean, they were a growing church. And we noticed last week how when he gives the greetings to the bishops and to the deacons and to the church, obviously the church had grown. It had been 11 years since he was there. And now they had this leadership structure set up in the church. So the church was bigger. They were carrying on the ministry when Paul wasn't there, and they were growing. And again, that's something that gave Paul joy because they were participating in that ministry. And so that's what they were doing. Let's look at a little short one here that talks some more about this whole issue.
Talk a little bit more about these things that are leading to burnout. What are some of the factors that play into that?
There's three words that come to mind. I'll give you the three words and then I'll unpack them. Church, ministry, time. Church is, I think that we've developed an unbiblical view of what the church is. The church is not a spiritual institution like a department store where we try to build the best, most attractive thing on the block so you'll come in and you'll shop with us. That's an unbiblical view of the church. And it means that people become consumers, they have no loyalty to the work, and they come with unending expectations that you're going to just keep producing the next thing that's going to keep them interested. Eugene Peterson has written about this. I think that we've got this build view of the church. My job is to build all these programs. My job is to fill this building till it's full. My job then is to build another building. It's build. That's the stuff of future burnout. Because you can never have Sabbath because you've set these expectations. We have Macy's view of the church that we build this thing that people want to come to, and we've got to keep attracting them or they won't keep coming, rather than we're not just a community of worship or a community of love. The church is ours. We're the ministers of the church, and our leaders are there to equip us to do the work of the church. Second is unbiblical view of ministry, that ministry is largely an individual thing. There's individual ministry is a delusion because none of us could have ever gotten to the point we are alone. Not only do we need God's help, we need all kinds of human help. And so if I say it's it's about me. I load all the needs of the church on my shoulders. No wonder I get burnout. Whether it's a church of 50 or 5,000, no one man could shoulder all the spiritual needs in a given week of that congregation, whether it's small or large. It's just impossible. So that view, that individual view of ministry, it's just not a biblical view of the church at all. Does God set apart people for ministry? Yes, he does. Does he give them particular gifts? Yes, he does. But it communicates all over the place that this whole thing called ministry is a community project and it's highly relational. The third thing is time. It's very clear, the account of creation, that the only thing in that whole account that's unlimited is God. We have all kinds of limits, and one of the things we have are limits of time. I will never get 30 hours in a day. I'll never get 10 days in a week. And I'll never get 450 days in a year. Never. God has set limits for me. And so, as a pastor, I have three big dimensions in my life. I have my own spiritual life. I have my familial life and friends, my relational life. And then I have my ministry life. Now, those are three overlapping circles. Outside of those, I have nothing because I don't have extra time. If an area of my life grows, where does it have to grow? It can't grow outward because there is no outward because God has set limits for me. It has to grow inward. So it grows into family. It grows into my personal spiritual life. So you'd be shocked at how many pastors would confess they don't any longer have personal devotional time because they're too busy, who are absentee fathers and absentee husbands. One of the guys I mentored, he came home one day and his wife said, "I'm done." It's me or ministry. If you're in a situation where what you've been assigned to do in ministry is not doable, and keep God's calling as in your relationship with him and keep God's calling in your family, you've got to go to your leaders and say, "I can't do this." Either I'm not the man for this job, we have to hire somebody else alongside of me, or we have to rewrite the expectations you have for me. But I will not sacrifice my family, and I will not sacrifice my spiritual life for ministry. There are many ministry families that are unhealthy. Look, the Bible never ever warns a pastor. You can't find one passage that says to a pastor, if you really give yourself to the kingdom of God, your family will suffer. Why is that? God will never call me to obey one command that means I have to disobey another one. We have that going on because we have a wrong perspective on ministry. Wrong perspective on the church, wrong perspective on the nature of ministry, and a wrong perspective on our own personal limits. The result is a culture of pastors that are burning out.
Still falls back to one thing. Take your burdens and all your problems to the Lord and leave them there. Don't grieve on them and chew on them. That's what he wants us to do. And that's what I try to do if I can. But Satan, he knows how to get to us. He knows us individually and how he can work us up and get on our shoulder and whisper in our ear and say, "Boy, this is going on," or "That's going on." And we have to be careful. We'll let him just send us in the wrong direction. But if we give it to the Lord, that's easy because he loves us. We put our trust in him and he's our leader. And that's where I'm at.
And so a lot of times we're guilty of taking on things we see and it's incremental. We pick up this thing and we just, the pastor's the same way. And we pick up something, sees it, and it just kind of builds and the backpack gets heavier and heavier and heavier and can't bear it. Is there any other truth, Mary Ellen?
I don't believe in those ways. Art is preaching. You can't do all these other things and stay a good preacher. And I feel sorry for pastors in smaller churches where they're expected to do all these things. That's when you need lay people to step up and say, well, I can take over the visitation program.
Yeah, I can do hospital, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, there's a gift of administration or other gifts that serve the church. Hmm. Yeah. You know, we're focusing on the pastor relationship as we see it here in Philippians, but it applies to our own life as well. Like he was talking about the concentric circles, our ministry, our family, and other things. It's easy to one, it'll encroach on another to the detriment of the other areas that are equally important or sometimes more.
I think too, a lot of times people don't want to step up and fill a void. In this church in particular, you've got older people who have the time, they don't have the help. The younger people have the help, but they don't have the time. So we're kind of in between, we don't have people to fill
Mm-hmm.
certain gaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was watching, I didn't include it in the lesson, but it was interesting, a comment that was made in regard when you said stepping up, and is when you think of Jesus' disciples, well, and you had in the New Testament, you had the 70 that Jesus sent out, and you had the 12, the disciples, and then among the 12 there were the three that were these inner circles, and the comment that this pastor was making is that Jesus's relationship. I mean, why did Jesus had more of a close relationship with Peter and James and John than the rest of the disciples, and why is that? And why did he have more relationship with the 12 than he did the 70? And the contention was is these were the ones that gave more to Christ. They gave themselves more to Christ. Therefore, he manifested himself more to them. And I think that, like your comment, Thelma, about people stepping up. I mean, there's the ones that are stepping up and alongside the pastor and doing the work of the church have a closer relationship with the church and the pastor, and those that are just the ones that are not, are less involved. And it's kind of that, and he said, you would expect more of a relationship with Christ as you devote yourself more to him. And that's an interesting comment. So how big is this problem? This data comes from a couple of years ago, and actually I think it was pandemic. But it is a big. I looked at another places. A huge percentage of pastors that are in the ministry are burning out and have thoughts about leaving because of that. This in this case is as much as half mainline pastors. And the reasons are many, and the immense stress of the job is more than half of the reasons that pastors are thinking about this. Lonely and isolated is another feeling. Political divisions within the church causing stress, unhappy with the role that it is having on the family because of time, being like he mentioned that one visible absentee father because so involved in the church. So there's lots of reasons in there. I was looking for examples of partnership, and I think first one that came to mind is Moses and his father-in-law Jethro. You remember the story when Moses, he led the Hebrews into the out of Egypt, and Moses was trying to do all the judging by himself. And his father-in-law came for a visit, Jethro, and he observed Moses doing this. You know, from morning, it said from morning till night, Moses was sitting in judgment, trying to judge between one Hebrew and another, one family and another, make all these judgments. And he watches his son-in-law doing this. And at the end of the day, he says, what you're doing is not good. What you're doing is not good. You need help. And so Jethro suggested that he set up judges and hire judges, lower judges, set up a hierarchy to handle these cases, and then only the hard ones would come to Moses. And so he was in that. Philemon, Elijah giving up, and God sent Elisha. We have a couple other partnerships, Paul and Silas and Paul and Barnabas. Ecclesiastics 2 are better than 1. So the bottom line is, okay, so this whole thing of I quit, I'm not coming back. What lesson can we take out of this? And I think it is we should be a Philippian. We should be like the Philippians and do what when we're looking back in first part of the lesson here, partner with the pastor, participate, contribute, take part, always help, communing the gospel. And I think I put it number 1 here, watch for warning signs. Watch for warning signs. And we all know what they might be. And say when there's signs of the stress, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a pastor, it could be anybody, but kind of watch when we need to come alongside, when we need to do something to help. And that's what was given Paul joy in verse 5, was the Philippians doing just that. And that's my story. This is for your with all joy, says, for all your fellowship in the gospel. So, any other last thoughts?
She wants something, she says, sits down, says, I'll do it myself. We forget to give it to the one that can't take care of it.
Yeah. And we forget sometimes that by letting somebody help us, we're giving them a blessing. Yeah, Thelma said that. To quote somebody I know real well. Okay. All right. Gary, would you mind closing today?
Grant each one of us a personal understanding of the stress that our pastors are under, that we would endeavor to take the time to go in his office, close the door, and just say, how you doing? Do not expect this stock answer of, oh, I'm okay. No, how are you doing? We would all be supportive of our pastor and staff in recognition of the great stress that they're under. Their desire is to have a close relationship with everyone. Bless this time, bless this preaching that's coming up. Bless us as a class. They're labeled encouragers. Let us not always just encourage each other, but encourage our Pastor said. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. Everybody. See you guys. Onward and upward.
See you in the funnies.
All righty. See you guys.